Hey everybody, before we jump into this week's episode, I can't help but share how excited I am for the Going Somewhere podcast family to be partnering with one of my favorite organizations in the world, Feed One, to feed kids all around the world. Check out this quick video to learn more.
According to the World Food Program, more than 66 million young children attend school hungry. But together, we could work to end this suffering. Anyone can help through Feed One. Feed One uses nutritious meals as the doorway to providing education, healthier living environments, clean water, and most importantly, hope. Today, Convoy of Hope is feeding hundreds of thousands of children around the world every school day. But there's still more that needs to be done. By partnering with churches, businesses, universities, and people like you, Feed One can continue the important work of feeding the next generation of leaders. Just $10 feeds a child every school day for an entire month. As Mother Teresa said, if you can't feed 100 people, then feed just one. Make a difference and feed one today.
Amazing. So here is where each and every one of you comes into play. By giving $10 a month, we are able to feed a child for an entire month. What would happen if everybody listening to this week's episode would contribute just $10 a month? And we can do that today. If you head over to feedone.com/going somewhere, we can raise money to feed kids all around the world. So let's do that. And without further ado, let's check out this week's episode with Amy Olson. Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the Going Somewhere podcast. Today I am joined by my friend Amy Olson. How are you doing, Amy?
I'm great. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm very excited to have you on. This is actually almost a year in the works. I think you were one of the first people I reached out to when I started the podcast. And you're off here being a big professional golfer, and it's hard to do this.
I think you texted me when I was going to be gone 5 of the next 6 weeks.
Yes.
So
totally understandable,
yeah.
But I'm happy that you're here. This is amazing.
Yes, finally worked out.
So give our listeners just a little bit of the background. Who is Amy Olson?
Yeah. Amy Olson. I grew up in Oxbow, North Dakota. So a very small town, mostly just a golf course community. And my dad loved the game of golf, introduced me to it when I was probably 2 years old, bribed me with snacks, as parents do. And I really didn't like golf at first. Honestly, I thought it was really boring. It was frustrating. My brother, who's a year and a half older than me, loved it from the get-go. So as, a lot of younger siblings do, I kind of just followed in his footsteps, whatever he was into. And at the ripe old age of 4, my dad made us choose between golf and t-ball. So I chose golf. It worked out great. I ended up playing at NDSU on a scholarship. After I was done there, I made it on the LPGA tour, and I've been playing professional golf for a decade now, 10 years.
Wild.
Yeah,
10 years?
Totally.
That's crazy.
It has flown.
I love your dad's intensity of,
oh yeah.
And I know your dad, so golf or t-ball. This is the rest of your life. You will go pro in one of the two.
Well, and my husband Grant has a different philosophy. He thinks that you can do both of them. You just have to do one left-handed and the other right-handed. How do you think that's going to work?
Well,
You've got kids.
Let's just check in on Grant Olson's golf career.
Yeah.
And nope, it doesn't work.
No, okay.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, and you're married to Grant.
Yes.
And, fun thing. I actually got to officiate your guys' wedding and do your premarital counseling. So.
Yes, I know. We enjoyed those sessions so much. I know we've laughed about it because I was on tour at the time. We got married in the middle of my season in June. And On a Tuesday. Very important detail. Highly recommend. Honestly, I've been trying to convince everybody since then. Get married on a Tuesday. Venues are open. Caterers are open. Photographers are open. Way cheaper. I mean, nobody's taking me up on it.
So I'm actually officiating a Tuesday wedding in 2 weeks.
Yes.
So it'll be my second ever.
Oh,
and so I was thinking.
This is a trend at this point.
I was going over dates with them. And they're like, what about the 18th? And I looked at my calendar, like, Tuesday. And they're like, yep. And I was like, sounds great.
Done it
this
before.
Is great. I have a precedence for this. So.
That's awesome.
So how long have you guys been married?
It's going to be 6 years in June. So we're at 5.5.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I think about it, I kind of have had, as far as my golf career, professional career, I've been married for half of it and I was single for half of it, which both were very different. And it was an adjustment being married and having to like, okay, I can't make every single decision based on what is best for Amy Olson and her golf game. Like, have a husband.
Right.
That's more important now. And so just trying to like adjust and balance that and try to have kind of a life included in the professional golf space, which for anyone who doesn't follow the tour, like we play from the beginning of January until the end of November. So I'm on the road. On average, over the last 9 years, I've been on the road 32 weeks every year.
And then the other 20 weeks, it's not like you're just sitting on the couch like, oh, this is great.
Eating Doritos.
Yeah. Like, that's not how that works.
No.
What does the other 20 weeks look like?
The other 20 weeks, there's certainly more, I would say, relaxed. Like I'm not competing, obviously, but I'm training. So I'm working out, I'm practicing, and usually you have to fit a dentist appointment in there, your haircuts, all those important things.
Well, and people that aren't from North Dakota that listen to the podcast, it's hard to golf here during those 20 weeks. And so you travel a lot to golf and trade and do all those things.
People think that hitting out of the snow would be like the same as a sand bunker. Just use an orange ball. You'll be able to find it. Yeah. It's not the same.
Especially when there's 4 feet of it like we have right now. But right. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. But yeah, no, that's kind of part of your guys' story that's always been really cool and crazy to me is that when you guys started dating, he was actually a football coach in Wyoming, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so you guys started your journey long distance and have had a long distance marriage to an extent throughout. How have you guys kind of navigated that and dealt with that throughout the years?
Yeah. Well, it was really interesting. Like I mean, truthfully, I had a crush on Grant Olson when we were in college.
Heyo.
And, member of the golf team, wasn't quite cool enough for star linebacker, whatever. So we laugh about that. But we never spoke in college. We had mutual friends, kind of knew of each other. I just knew of his reputation. Like he'd gotten saved as a sophomore and became very involved in just like a Bible study on the football team and had an awesome reputation for just loving Jesus and loving his teammates. So I kind of like saw him from afar, and I graduated a year before he did, so I kind of joined the tour. I'm traveling all over.
Right.
He graduates, moves out to Wyoming. I have no reason to go to Wyoming. He has no reason to ever come out to the LPGA. So our relationship really started on social media of just a comment back and forth here and there. And then we started messaging. And then what was really cool is we started emailing.
Heyo. Wow.
Yeah. So that's probably a little bit unusual as well. But we really just got to know each other kind of on a deeper level, just like what was important to us. Like we were both at the stage in our lives where we were like, we don't want to just waste time. We don't want to play games. Like this is not just about finding somebody fun to go eat ice cream with. Like this is this somebody that I could potentially share my life with and serve the Lord together with. And so, I mean, I remember it was probably like 2 months into our email exchanges, and we were talking about just like what God has called us to do, what we feel like our giftings are. And it was just so interesting how like we both obviously had the faith and then the athletics background, but we just had such a passion to serve others, and particularly to serve others in our home through hospitality. And I mean, it's been one of those things where like, because I travel so much, it's been difficult to fit that in, but we've had the same priorities and we've wanted the same things. And anyway, so it was like very early that we just were talking about like, how could God use us? And then how could God use us together?
Right.
So anyway, I mean, that was kind of obviously going through email, like you're just not going to small talk all day. It was honestly like, who are you? What do you want? Where are you going?
I would love the copies of Grant Olson's email. Right. One of the things I love about you guys is your intentionality, and like what you just described is like, number one. That's the example right there. But I think it's that intentionality that as I was getting to know you, because I didn't know you at all before you guys were engaged, I don't think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so just knowing Grant as well as I did, and then seeing the person that he was choosing, like, I want to pursue this. I want to get married to this person. It was so cool. And I know when you look at it on paper of like, okay, she's gone 32 weeks out of the year and more because of training, and he's a college coach who's recruiting. I think that's another thing. People look at coaches and they're like, wow, they have such a long off season. No, you don't. Yeah. They leave like from the championship to go recruit people and recruit students. So it's just crazy. But I knew like almost right away, like if anybody can do this and thrive in it, it's you guys. And I've just been so impressed over the last, it's crazy to think, but almost 6 years.
Yeah.
And not only how like you guys have built this beautiful marriage, but also how much work it's taken to do that and intentionality it's taken to do that. And
yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing we both would say is that God is good, and he provides and he fills in, the grace because neither Grant and I or I are perfect. I mean, shocking, but
no,
we always say the best thing we did is we married a very forgiving person.
Yeah.
And I think so often marriages all look different, right? But really, the successful marriages and the ones that, we've looked up to and tried to emulate, they're on mission and God is first. So it's like, if God's first, you're on mission together, you can't drift too far apart.
Yeah.
And so I think that's been one of the things that even though physically we've been going, a million different directions, in our hearts and in our spirits, we are headed in the same direction. And as we both have grown closer to God, even over the last 6 years of being married, you naturally grow closer to each other. That's
so cool. Take notes, everybody. If you're looking, that was so good though. I think that idea of being on mission is something that maybe we overlook of like our life has purpose in Christ. And I think you mentioned it earlier, but the hospitality piece, and I know one of your guys' first stops was Indiana. You were basically in a prison town, essentially, with a football, with a university there. But I just remember hearing those stories of you guys learning. That was the first part of your marriage, and having students in your home and athletes in your home. Do you want to just kind of talk about how that's become such a key part of your marriage and your life and your ministry together? Yeah. I mean, Grant obviously has so much interaction being the linebacker coach at NDSU. Like, he's constantly interacting with the students. And when I'm gone, I miss out on that a fair bit. And so what's really fun for me is when we can have them over to the house and we might play games. You guys play games? Imagine that. I know. And it was so fun. We had a recent one. We made all of the linebackers bring a date. Some of them already have girlfriends, right? So they brought their girlfriends. The other ones had to find somebody. Might have known them for one day. Might have known them for 2 days. Yes. And then we did like the newlywed game where you ask questions about the strong correlation between how long people have known each other and how well they did at that game. Imagine What's my middle name? Yeah. Oh, that would have been a good one. We didn't even ask that question. What's my last name? It's probably even better for that situation. There might have been some that might not have known that. But yeah, we just have really enjoyed being able to open our home. I just think so many conversations and so much openness can happen in the context of your home more than going out to a restaurant a lot of times. And so Grant and I have found that like just opening our home, having food, having, some sort of an activity, because if people are uncomfortable, like it just helps everyone to lighten up and have a bit of an icebreaker. And that really did, like you said, it started in Indiana. In Indiana, because we got married and we lived there for 2 years, and Grant had just moved there like 3 months before we got married. Right. So it was like brand new for both of us. We have very few friends, and it was just like, okay, how do we do this? And we just started inviting, it was the linebackers usually, or it was the golf team, because I got to know the golf team really well there as well. And that was just our way to kind of begin that. And I won't say that I'm in any way an expert. We try to keep it really simple. Like, you're not getting an extravagant meal at the Olsons. A lot of times it's like hamburgers and hot dogs or maybe some taco meat. But, I think sometimes people try to overcomplicate hospitality, and then they make it such a big thing or this such a big deal. My house has to be perfect. The food has to be perfect. And honestly, that's not what people even remember about it. It's the conversations, it's the relationship. And so we've just tried to be really intentional in making that a priority. And it's been a huge blessing, honestly, to us. That's so cool. I feel like, everybody else that's listening to maybe has overthought it, or not everybody is wired that way of like my space. I want to make it a place that people can feel at home, but maybe what are a couple things that people can do to kind of make hospitality a part of their life? Because I think it's like one of the greatest, witnesses and ministry things that all of us can do.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great question. And I think it will look different for everybody. I think it's hard to sometimes look at, a couple that you're like, oh, they do it so well. And then you're like, but I can't do that. Like I work in the evenings or weekends or whatever. And so it will look different for everybody and it'll look different in different seasons of life. I think for us, it's just been a matter, the word you used earlier, intentionality. It's like, you have to look in advance. When is my schedule free? And you can't just like do the spur of the moment. I mean, you can, but a lot of times it won't work. So it's like, you got to get a date on the calendar a week or 2 weeks in advance. A lot of us don't think that far in advance, and anyway, and then honestly, simple is so much better. So like I have probably 3 meals and I repeat those meals a lot, it's like, you don't have to come up with something new every single time. And then as far as the house, they are going to see it like it is, sometimes it's clean and sometimes it's not. And that's okay, because that's real life. And I think that one of the biggest things about hospitality is being authentic and not trying to put on a face of like, trying to be somebody that you're not. And home is the place where you can be yourself and hopefully where other people can also be themselves. Because honestly, it's a lot of times in the brokenness and in the messiness that's where the best conversations and the best relationships in ministry can happen, not in perfection.
That's so good. I think, the messy house or just like the normal, this is our house. I mean, of course I'm going to like put the underwear in the laundry basket, but I think that is actually a picture of life itself. I think that's a comment that we've had before. Like, thanks for not making your house perfect and your life look perfect.
One thing we were challenged, we just did a study, Francis and Lisa Chan did the You and Me Forever study, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Lisa talked about in there is she's like, I will never buy new carpet because for me, new carpet would not make me want to invite people over because then they could mess it up and it would, so all of a sudden these new things or these really nice things prevent her from opening her home or being hospitable. And it's different for everybody. For other people, they might be like, oh, now I can like show my house it's presentable.
Right. Yeah.
So it's different for everyone, not trying to make a legalistic rule, but actually looking at the things and going, is there anything in my house that I'm afraid is going to break? If I don't want it to get muddy. Is that potentially creating a barrier for me using my home to love people? And if it is, you probably need to get rid of it. Right. Or maybe it's I'm not going to buy certain things because that's going to stop me from not caring what happens to my house if I invite people into it. Right. So that was kind of a challenge that Grant and I took, and we were like, okay, we need to actually think about this as we're buying things or replacing things. Like, are we okay if they get broken?
That's so good. And hospitality is not about impressing people. It's about loving them and showing them that you care. So that's so good. I know, I wanted to chat about your golf career and just not many people know a professional athlete of any kind. And so I think that life itself is so interesting. And so do you just want to share maybe a minute or so of just kind of what that has looked like and what kind of a week looks like? Because when you watch golf on TV, it's like, oh, they're golfing. That's what I do, we've talked about this and we'll maybe share about it. But just the idea of like, when you travel, like people find out what you do and they're like, oh, well, I got this backswing issue. Can you
fix my slice while I'm like sitting here on the airplane next to you? No, I cannot.
You have a very relatable career in the level of like, oh yeah, I've golfed before. Like I've mini golfed. Like, I get it. But what is kind of like the day to day and just kind of what is being on tour like right now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many different aspects I could go into, but like one of the things, the LPGA tour is very global. So we have people from probably 40 different countries around the world on our tour at any given time. And then we also travel to a lot of countries. So there's some years where I've traveled to probably 12 different countries in the same year. And it kind of depends on the year, depending on what tournaments you get into, what tournaments you choose to play. But I mean, everything from Bahamas, Australia, Thailand, Singapore, Japan, China, all the way over to Europe and playing in Scotland and France and England. So I've been able to get a lot of stamps on my passport. I've stayed in a lot of hotels. People ask me, like, when you go to these places, like, do you get time to sightsee? Do you do anything fun? And the answer is no.
Right.
I mean, there's a few times, like when I was in China, I was like, I am 45 minutes away from the Great Wall and I'm not coming back here. So we're going to make sure that this happens. So I took half a day and I made it to the Great Wall and that was awesome. But like realistically, Monday is travel day. Tuesday, you're playing a practice round. Wednesday is what they call a pro-am, and they really only need like 40 to 50 of the 150 contestants that week playing with like the sponsors of the event.
Okay.
So a lot of times I'm in the pro-am playing on Wednesday, but if I'm not, then you're practicing. And then the competition starts Thursday. You play Thursday, Friday. After Friday, there's a cut. So if you're not in the top half of the field, you're done for the week and you make zero money, even though you had to pay your caddy and you had to pay your flight and you had to pay your, your hotel and your rental car and all this. So when people say, oh, I play golf, that must be awesome. Like, it would be so fun to be a professional golfer. That's my dream job. I'm like, I don't get paid to play golf. I get paid to play good golf.
Yeah.
And that's where the stress comes in, because if you're not at the top of your game, and the difference is like this between the really good players each week
right.
and then those that miss the cut. And so the stress that puts on as an individual athlete, because it's not like I can just get subbed in like, hey, not running as fast as I, feel or whatever, something hurts
right.
today, let's just sub in my backup. Like, doesn't happen.
Right.
So it's really, it's an interesting career. But honestly, it's a very stressful career. And that's been something that I've had to manage, and because you have to live with it. It's not like you can just live in a state of stress for 30 weeks a year. Like, you have to figure out how to downregulate. You have to figure out how to cope with all of that.
Well, that stress piece is funny because anybody that golfs can resonate with stress, because for some reason we all think that we're like this close to being pro and no, we shot like a plus 15. But, so when that cut is in mind, obviously if you're golfing and you kind of know the cut line, like how do you manage that part? Because like even the idea of most people, they don't realize like, your livelihood, you can get paid really well as a professional golfer and that's awesome. But also you can get paid zero. You can put in a whole week's work, pay all those expenses, and then walk away with a big negative.
Yeah,
and so
exactly.
How have you learned to manage some of that? And
you have to play some serious mind games with yourself.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, honestly, the hardest thing about golf for me has been you have to practice like it is the most important thing in the world to you. And then you have to play like you don't care at all. So being able to flip back and forth between those two things, because you have to show up and practice every single day and put 100% in, right? And you can't do that unless you really, really, really care. But then also when you tee it up on Thursday, you have to swing free. And how do you do that when you really, really, really care? So you have to convince yourself that this shot doesn't matter. And that, honestly, one of the biggest things, because as a believer, I do believe that shot doesn't matter. Like, I do believe that week it matters and it doesn't matter all at the same time. Yeah. So for me, one of the biggest things in, I would just say managing the stress and everything has been eternal perspective. What really matters. And honestly, when it comes down to it, it's how I treat people. It's how I behave. It's the effort that I put in, and the results, I'm leaving it up to him. Because if he wants me on tour, he'll keep me there. And if he's got a different plan, he can send me a different way. Right. And so honestly, being able to practice and put effort in, because I know that whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as if you're working for the Lord, not for men. And then also trusting that the results are in his hands. That's the only way I've been able to figure out how to play freely. Wow. Because otherwise, I don't know, honestly, how people do it without Christ. I honestly don't. Because it's such a dichotomy of having to care, but then also having to not care. And I think the only way to do that is with true perspective, which I think only comes from the Bible and from an eternal view of what really matters.
And I think that translates to life so well too, of like, working at it with all your heart, but also that idea of living freely, and the idea of doing that without Jesus does seem uncomprehendable to me. But at the same time, I know you've had lots of highs, you've performed well, even back to college, like, and juniors, because you won the
U.S. Girls Junior Amateur,
Yeah.
right before I entered college. It was in 2009. Yeah, I was 17.
So you've had like some extreme success. You've placed second at majors, and then you've also had some lows. And so how have you kind of managed that as well? And, I just can't imagine like having just that swing, and it is a sport that you can go so drastically the other way. But what's that been like for you?
Yeah, well, I think in a lot of ways, like when people look from the outside, they're like, and part of it's my fault, because I tell people playing on the LPGA was my dream at 10 years old. That's what I wanted to do, and here I am doing it, right? But at the same time, I've had way more dreams than that and more plans, and they haven't happened. So I think like my career in some ways is, okay, I knew what I wanted to do and I went and did it, which almost never happens. Like that's a very rare thing in life. But then on the other side, I've had a lot of things that I haven't accomplished, or a lot of disappointments where I came up just short of what I wanted to do. I mean, the second place is in majors. I'm one shot away from first place, and you look at that. One of my goals was to play on the U.S. Solheim Cup team, which is the U.S. versus Europe. And 2 years I've finished, of the 12 people, I finished 13th, and wow. It's like, it's so close, but at the same time, it's so far, because the difference between 13 and 12, you might as well have been 20th,
Right.
So I think for me, it ultimately, dealing with those disappointments, I've always had to come back to God has a bigger plan and he's going to use this. Because for me, I'm like, I wanted my story to be this way. I wanted this to happen, and it obviously didn't. I think every single person, it's not exclusive to golf. This is just life, right?
Right, yeah.
Every single person has, I wanted this to happen by this time. I wanted to achieve this. I wanted to be married. I wanted to have kids. I wanted whatever XYZ is. And you deal with disappointment, and that's just a very real part of life. And I think the hard thing is we all have our plans, and we want to hold them like this, with tight fists, and like, we are going to just make sure that it happens. And the Lord's asking us to hold all of our hopes and dreams with an open palm. And it's like, yes, we want this, and he wants to know what we want. But at the end of the day, it's like Jesus when he was in the garden about to be crucified, and he's like, Lord, please take this cup from me. So this is like what he wanted. He's praying for what he wanted. And then he's saying, but not my will, but yours be done. So it's like, again, a dichotomy of like, God wants to know what's on our heart. Yeah. He wants to know what we desire. And yet at the same time, he wants us to lay that down before him.
I just think that's so awesome. And just, I've kind of said it this way, like, follow Jesus, not your dreams, because, a lot of the message that we hear growing up is follow your dreams, which is not bad advice. Like it's at its core, it's actually pretty like, just encouraging.
Yeah. Right.
But when I've kind of looked at that and kind of looked at like, if I'm just going to follow my dreams, I might miss out on all that God has for me. But by following him first and foremost, the thing that comes of our life is so much better than we could have ever hoped, dreamed, or imagined. And I see that in you. Like I see that in you and Grant, and just the fact that maybe the career didn't go to a T how you expected it, or those second place finishes, one putt, one chip, all those things could have been different. But I think it's your steadiness through that has pointed me to the fact that, wow, her security in Jesus is unlike anything I've really seen. And I've just loved that about you. Your perseverance. I think of like Finding Nemo, just keep swimming, but it's like,
yes.
just keep swinging, just keep swinging.
Yes,
like I think for you, that's what I see as somebody that in life in general, what happens on the golf course just translates to your life of just like, God's got a plan through this. And I think that's so beautiful.
But I think like what the funny thing to me about it is, it's like, obviously you want these things and obviously you work for them and everything. But ultimately, what most people are searching for is not success. It's not fame, and it's not money. It's peace. Like everybody wants peace. Yeah. Everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants joy. And it's like, I have all those things. Like Christ offers that freely, apart from your accomplishments, apart from your relationship status, apart from, any of these other things that we chase after. And I think so many people chase after these things and they don't realize what they want is not those things, but what they think it will give them. And that's that peace, that joy. And it's like, that's already ours.
Right.
If you've trusted Christ. And so it is, like you said, everybody, follow Jesus, not your dreams, because Jesus doesn't let you down. Yeah. And he freely offers all of your true heart's desires.
That's so good. Cause I can even put myself in your shoes, at some of those second place finishes, and I think of one in particular, I can't remember which tournament it was, but when Grant's dad had just passed and like the storyline could have just been this perfect thing.
Yeah.
Yet even after that, like to national media shared where that security comes from and that confidence. Like you've used that platform in such a gracious way, and God's done so much more through even that. Like even if you'd have won that, the whole story could have been, wow, look at this. Her father-in-law passes away. She wins this in honor of him. Yet instead it was you speaking of the hope in eternity and those things, which was like one of the most powerful things. We were watching it in our office at AO1. We were followed, I don't think we did any work that weekend, as you were in contention for the win there. And so we were watching, and then we were just blown away. Like it was emotional in our office seeing how you responded in that very difficult moment.
Well, and I think I have a couple things just related to that. One is that God did use that. I've heard from so many people that have just said like, wow, that encouraged me because I lost someone, and like your just story of hope and like where your security is, like I absolutely believe that God used that for good. And then the second thing is, I think so many people want to, or they say like, well, when my moment happens, like I'll prepare, or like, and it's like the preparation has to happen long before the moment, and you don't always know what moment God's going to use, but you just have to be ready. And so I know for me, it's been a lot about just spending time in the Word, spending time in prayer, asking God to use me however he will, and doing that day after day after day. And you don't know which moment he's going to use, but once it happens, it's too late to prepare. So being faithful in the really ordinary days is so key.
When First Peter says, I think it's First Peter, but be prepared to give a reason for the hope that you have. Yeah. Always be prepared. And I think that shows that like point blank of like, you weren't obviously thinking about that as you were golfing and all those things. Right. And I think there's this level of, as Christians, eyes are on us a lot, and more than we realize. Like people are watching. How are you going to react to that? How are you going to think about that? What are you going to say to that person that treated you poorly? And in your case, and in that case in particular, that story was just the whole day. Watching it, you were on the video almost the whole day, every one of your shots. And every time you were standing by your bag, it was a close-up on your face. And I think, to me, I was even in that moment thinking like, whoa. Because right now, people know that she's going through this tragedy, that her husband's not here, because taking care of family stuff, like all those things. And we had like your face, like big on the TV,
staring at me,
seeing how is she going to react to this. And, there was emotion, there was times where you were wiping tears, but you took shot after shot. You just kept swinging, knowing that God was going to make something bigger come out of this whole story.
And, in that moment, you're not thinking, how is God going to use this?
Right.
That's the last thing on your brain. You're literally like, how do I put one foot in front of the other? How do I take one more swing? And ultimately that, again, it's God's strength that carried me through. Cause like, I just wanted to go crawl in a closet and cry, and I mean, being out on the golf course, with cameras all over you was the last thing I wanted to do, right? And so it really came down to like, where am I supposed to be? Because I could have just withdrawn. I could have withdrawn, flown home, and everybody, including all of Grant's family, just said, no, like, you're where you're supposed to be. And so just knowing that, like, if this is where I'm supposed to be, God will give me the strength to get through it. And so honestly, I spent that entire day singing a praise song and praying. And that's really what got me through. When you talk about doing things in your own strength, it's like, that one was so far beyond my own strength. And, regardless of what other people see, like, I know in my heart of hearts, like, God was carrying me through that entire day and giving me the strength. And like, I don't remember I don't remember crying until like the 18th hole. And then like the last putt went in and it was like, okay, like I'm done. Like I felt like I had to stuff all the emotions,
right,
up until that point. And then it was like, okay, now it's coming out. And then everybody wants interviews. And I'm like, I can't talk right now. Like, how is this, But again, it was just like, Lord, if this is what I'm supposed to do, help me get through it and give me the words to speak and all of that. And he did.
That's, yeah. And your example, I've seen you actually on golf course. Like, I was hitting at a driving range and you happened to be at the golf course doing a, kind of a class with some younger kids and stuff. And like, for kids to have an example, I can't think of any. I'm so grateful that my kids know you and Grant, like, just to have people that are in their life that have been living in such a way that's full of integrity and full of intentionality and understands mission and purpose. Because you could be sitting here today thinking like, if I win an event, then I will have achieved it. Then I'll have made it. But that's just not how you live. And it's obvious to me and to others, like, that you are living for a purpose that's so much greater than what maybe people have pinned to Amy of like, this is what her purpose is, or this is what would be success for Amy.
But I think like, and so much of what I believe and what I say, like, it is true. And that is how I live. But I have those moments. I'm sitting there thinking, well, if, like, then I'll have achieved what I wanted. Then I'll be really happy. Then I'll, so I think, and especially because we're bombarded by the world. Like, I do a lot of interviews with, secular media or just people who all they care about is golf. And it's like, well, when is this going to happen? Like, do you feel like you're on the verge? And it's like, I mean, I do. Like, I if I didn't feel like that, I wouldn't still be out here playing, competing. But yet at the same time, like, I have to hold this other belief that, like, even though I feel like I can do it and I care about it, again, it's like with open hands. And so it's a tension to live in,
right,
for sure. Because honestly, if I didn't care, I wouldn't still be doing it. Yeah. Right.
Absolutely. What would you define success? I think, like, in general, that question is a big one, but what's success to Amy Olson?
Oh, it's like so many aspects. Cause I just think of like the greatest command, right, is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. And like, the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. Like, that is success. Like, to live your life having just loved God with every part of your soul. Like, at the end of the day, that is success. But like, God's also wired us for different things. And like, for me, it is golf, and that's part of, obviously who I am. And I can use that to love people and to serve people and to display Christ, in a way that, you can't if you're, in a different field or whatever. So like, that's a unique area that God's called me to. And so for me, success is in a way gaining that platform and then using it for good. And that platform, I want it to come with success, but I think at the end of the day, the ultimate success is surrender. Because if you can surrender to God and let him write your story, like, it may not include millions of dollars. It may not include a super huge social media following or whatever it is that, we're supposed to care about. But what do we want? We want at the end of our lives, because remember, eternity is really, really long, and we're like here for this amount of time. And when we when we cross over to eternity, we want God to say, well done, good and faithful servant. That's success. And it really isn't more complicated than that.
There's no such thing as a bogey when you're following God. He doesn't give us a bogey life.
So encouraging.
So encouraging.
I cannot wait to heaven where there's no more bogeys.
To all sum it up.
Yes,
no more bogeys in heaven. Yeah, no. I feel like, as we land this plane a little bit, what is one or two pieces of advice you would give to any amateur golfer that's saying, hey, I'm sitting here with a professional golfer right now. How could I be better? That airplane question. Oh,
the airplane question. Well, here's the thing is I would say if there's two things that everybody across the board does, and we're talking like basic, like just amateur golfers, right? Everybody tries to swing way too hard.
Guilty.
I mean, it's not how straight it goes; it's how far it goes, right? That's what's
absolutely.
important. So
I actually just read something, or it was like a tweet or something, and it was like, I just got a new driver, so I can hit the ball 40 yards farther into the woods.
It's so true. So the first thing I would say is just slow down, because everybody's trying to like rip it as hard as they can, and honestly, very counterproductive. And then the second thing I would tell everybody is like when they go to the golf course, they just want to go to the range, go to the range. Go to the putting green. Like, it would be really beneficial to hit some chips and some putts and work on that, because I can't tell you how many shots I see people waste just like duff, like 4 putt. And then they're worried that their drive went, whatever, 220 yards instead of 260. And I'm like, no. You wasted way more shots up by the green.
There you go. Now you have it. Now you can go pro. Just like Amy Olson. No, it's amazing. So one of the questions that I ask every guest on the podcast is, what piece of advice would you give to your 22-year-old self? If you were to face off with 22-year-old Amy or 20-year-old Amy, what advice would you give her?
22-year-old Amy. Sometimes I think 22-year-old Amy had it more together than 30-year-old Amy. Is that bad? I'm like,
don't change.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think honestly, it would probably come down to just priorities and time management, because I think at that age, I was so concerned with, I have to get this checklist done each day. I have so much stuff I need to do. And I think and I'm still guilty of it. So I'm by no means to have this figured out, but it's like, if you can prioritize in your week some sort of a Sabbath, and within your day some time to just set aside and get alone with God, that will pay so much bigger dividends than whatever 15 minutes of extra sleep or whatever it is that you're trying to fit into your day. And I think that has been one of the things that I've just struggled with consistency. I was really good in college, honestly. And then as I got on tour, and it's like your schedule goes crazy and you don't have, that 7 a.m. every single day is when I wake up or whatever. That has been one of the hardest things for me to master. And I know as I look back when I was 22, it was like, there are times I wasn't even trying, And so if I look back on it, it would just be like, find that time to get alone with God and make sure that that's a priority each day to a certain extent, and then each week to a slightly larger extent.
Awesome. That's great advice. I know I just appreciate you jumping on here, and the dream is to one day have you and Grant on together as well.
You realize that would be like a 3-hour podcast.
Hey, we can break it into part 1, part 2, part 3, Yeah. Thanks for coming on. I know, as you go out to golf, you're going to be doing your thing, but you've also got some other things on the mind.
We do.
What would that possibly be, Amy?
Well, we're expecting baby Olson in September. I know.
Yes. So amazing.
Yes, we are so excited. So this year will definitely look different for me, as far as I'll play kind of as long as I can. But yeah, we're gonna be creating a human here. So
amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Who knows? Maybe this little one in you is just gonna take the golf game to the next level over the next few months.
You never know. Yeah.
I think it's a crazy thing as a female golfer. you can't just keep golfing.
I know.
There's a lot going on in the next several months here.
I think it was last year at the Masters, they were interviewing Jordan Spieth because he'd just become a dad. Maybe it was 2 years ago. I think it was just last year. And they're like, so like, what's changed, since you became a dad, like a week ago or a month ago or whatever. And he was like as far as his golf game. And he was like, honestly, nothing. And I was like,
Wouldn't that be nice?
like, I can't even listen to this right now.
Here,
it's like a little bit different for us.
Later this summer, Amy will be golfing and she'll barely be able to reach her arms around.
Exactly. I have like a basketball in front of me. Yeah.
Well, so good.
Maybe that's what I should do. I should just start practicing with a basketball.
There you go.
I'll be ready for it.
But you just guys got to keep pumping them out.
Yeah.
This is the hack. This is the golf hack for you. Amazing.
That would be something.
Well, before we end, I do have a little competition for us. And so
let's do it.
We will, all right. So Amy and I, here we go. Amy and I are going to have a little putt off here. We got 2 balls each with the mini putter. We're going to see who can win.
Oh boy, I think that's like in the bunker.
That's like the bunker of the water.
Made it.
Wow. Great form. Okay, let's see what I can do. I do have experience with this particular putting green, so we'll see what happens here.
It's got home field advantage. Oh no.
I got one.
Won.
Okay, second one. Gotta go.
He crushed it.
Please, everybody know that I beat Amy Olson.
They're not
And a pregnant woman almost fell off my chair.
They're not going to be hiring me on Golf Channel for my camera abilities. I promise you that.
All right. Thanks, Amy. Thanks, everybody. It's the end of an episode. Why not start another one? There's more just like it on the Going Somewhere podcast YouTube channel. Click one of the videos that you see right now to get all the latest, and there's a button in the middle. Click it to subscribe. We'll see you next time. Stay up to date on everything Going Somewhere podcast. We love you.